Okay, in this video here, what we're going to do is talk about, in essence, the heart of 3ds Max. We're going to talk about the command panel, which is this section right over here. And to really make it simple, it breaks down into 6 categories, if you will.
Sure.
Do we want to create something? Do we need to modify something? Do we need to work with a hierarchy? Do we need to work with motion? Do we need to deal with display? Or do we want to use any of the utilities that are included with 3ds Max? It breaks down into that simple of a thing.
Right.
You know, that's it.
Yeah.
Now, with each of these different ones, as we switch through the tabs right here, you'll find that the categories break down even further. Now, when we start dealing with the command panel, we're going to start dealing with some new things in regards to how the UI has been created, such as the ability to roll out parts.
Exactly.
So that becomes pretty big. And also, when we start getting into areas that have lots of stuff, you'll notice we have a little scroll bar over here on the side, indicating that, I mean, we can come over here and we can drag and jump up and down, or we can use the little grab hand that Bill showed you guys earlier.
Sure.
And slide up and down.
You can also extend the
you
panel.
can take this guy and drag it out if you'd like. Yep. So there's all sorts of things that you can do. Right now,
tear it off too.
Is it you can tear? Yeah, Bill's so quick you wanted to jump straight into the tearing it off feature. We understand, Bill. But you know, before we really start diving into this, that's the key thing you need to understand. It's kind of the heart of Max in a sense, because if you're wanting to create something, you know, you come over here and you find the stuff you want to create. You want to modify it. You want to blah, blah, blah. It's all found right here.
Yep.
Everything else in 3ds Max, all the stuff up here, the cute little animation stuff down on the side, you know, that's all the supporting actors, right?
Right.
Sure. Back up our main actor, if you will, which is this area.
Well, I mean, it's got that cool, important name, the command panel.
Well, there you go.
It sounds like you should have a chair with all sorts of buttons and knobs and
switches. It does have a chair. It's this bracketing system that goes down there.
There you go.
So now here's the deal. To really get into the nitty-gritty of the command panel, we could easily spend a couple of hours, and that is not the goal of these videos right here at the very beginning of the course. The goal of these videos are to provide you guys with a general overview of the 3ds Max user interface and to make you, a bit comfortable navigating around where you've heard some of the basic terminology, such as the command panel.
Right.
But to get into each and every specific detail, and we've already been talking about this with the main toolbar, the menu bar, etc., that's going to happen as we start working our way deeper and deeper into the course and we start getting into projects and things like that. So let's start out real simple. We're looking at the command panel. The very first tab, the Create.
Right.
It allows us to create stuff.
That's where we make things.
And you know, Autodesk, those smart little engineers over there, they made it so simple. They categorized everything.
Yep.
Cute do we want to come in here and create geometry? Do we want to create shapes, light, cameras, etc.? You'll notice as we click on each of these things, up underneath it, we get different selections of things that we can create. Now, check this out. They went a step further. It's like, we want to create geometry. Well, okay, that's fine. There's so many different types of geometry that you can create. We're going to make it so that we can categorize it even further. So now we can really, really define exactly what it is that we'd like to create. Let's say, for whatever reason, we feel like creating some doors today. Well, there's our doors. It's just that simple. So we'll come back up here to standard primitives, which is where you're going to find things like the box, the sphere, etc.
The really basic primitives like the box, the sphere, and the teapot.
Absolutely. And then, of course, for creating these things, it's pretty simple. You click the button, and whoa, this whole thing, it's dynamic. It comes to life. It lights up.
It rolled out.
It did roll out. It rolled out like crazy. Not everything rolled out, though. Look at the little plus right here for keyboard entry. Bloop. Now that's been rolled out. We do have a means to interactively create a sphere. In this particular case, since that button is pressed in, we can create it interactively, or we could use the keyboard entry and create it, our own way. Exactly. But, the bottom line is this. We simply come over here, click, drag, done. I have created a sphere. Here's the main thing I'm trying to get across right now. Look at my mouse. Look at the icon. I'm still in a create mode. And a lot of beginners, I guess, stumble in this particular area when they first start working with Max. They're like, okay, I just created the sphere, now I want to select it for... Oh, man, I done made another sphere. What's up with that? I need to... Oh, man. And you're going to stay in this mode until you right-click. So
notice the word sphere is still highlighted yellow.
That's right. So all I need to do is simply right-click, and I have deactivated that particular object that I am creating. Keep this in mind.
That's right. Many of the tools inside of 3ds Max use that system of right-clicking to end a particular action.
That's right. Now, guys, have a little fun with this. I mean, this stuff is not rocket science. You know, a cone, I'll let you, imagine what a cone looks like. A geosphere, a tube, a cylinder, a torus.
Yeah.
Okay, a plane might be a little bit difficult, right? So we'll come over here and we'll make a plane. So that's simple. And, of course, again, I right-click to deactivate the creation of another plane. So, that's it.
Yeah, chances are fairly good you're not going to break 3ds Max just by trying these out. So get in there and just see them all.
You want to play, make some primitives.
You want to make a light? Come over here to lights. And like, ooh, look at all these really cool kind of lights I can make. Try creating one. If I want to come over here and make a target director or something and then just add a light in and look at that. Now we've got some illumination going on. Yeah. And again, tons of things over here and roll out city.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
It's not going to be quite as tight for you guys unless you're running at 1024 by 768 like we are.
Which it's possible.
It is possible.
Hang on. There we go. Look at that. I'll tell you what, man. This application has got more parameters than one knows what to do with. They are indeed there. So have a little bit of fun. You know that the whole idea of this particular tab is the creation of various types of objects.
And the next tab's pretty fun, too.
Oh, it is. It allows you to modify objects.
Yes.
Right now I have a light selected. You can see right here a target directional light. And up underneath it we have a bunch of parameters all associated with that light.
Yep.
Wow. If I come down here to intensity and color and open that up and take my multiplier and let's say start turning it down. Ooh, it's getting awfully dark in here. Or if I come over here and I start changing my color, into some sort of really scary, let's make the audience nauseated color. There we go. While I have really changed the colors of those guys. Yep. I am now modifying my light. I'm changing. I'm modifying. That's the key thing. So if I come back here to one of my spheres, I still have the ability to get back to things like the radius, how much detail is in the object. As you can see, the detail changing up here as I change segments. If I want smoothing to be on or not on, if I want it to be faceted.
Sure.
And again, these are things that are going to be covered in depth as we progress further and further in the course. The key thing is, again, I'm changing or modifying the sphere.
That's right.
But modify tab or panel lets us go even further by applying modifiers to geometry.
That's right. Here in the Modify panel, we have the Modifier Stack, which really is the heart of 3ds Max.
That's right.
Yep.
I can say, take this sphere and come over here, click, and oh, wow, we have all sorts of things that we can do to modify this particular sphere. If I want to, twist it. Heck, I'm just looking for something. Look at this. And we have our sphere was created. We're making a little bit of history now.
Yep.
Now we have a twist on top of the sphere, and with the twist currently selected, that will indicate, or that will show the parameters associated with that modifier down here. So watch this. I can jump back in history to my sphere. I can still change its radius. Now I can step forward into the future where a twist was added. I can then come in here and start doing things like, let's start changing the angle. So now we have definitely modified the shape of this, right? Mm-hmm. And we can control, which particular axis that it was done on, and there's limits and all sorts of fun things that we can play with for controlling how this modifier will affect this sphere.
Right. You might say that the modifier has been stacked on top of the sphere command.
That's awfully fancy. That's absolutely right. And you can continue doing exactly what Bill just said. Stack modifiers. I can say, let's add a bend on top of the twist, where now, here's how you can read the stack. We're going to create a sphere, and with our sphere, we shall twist it. With our twisted sphere, we shall bend it.
Ooh,
okay?
Cool.
So, it's that simple. And then, of course, you can do things like rearrange the modifier stack.
Sure.
You can freeze it. You can so we can get rid of all of our modifiers. There's a lot of fancy stuff. Reorganize it. So now we're twisting a bent sphere.
Right, which looks pretty ugly.
But the bottom line is, as I was trying to push across so hard on the Create panel, on this panel, we're modifying.
That's right. And we're going to focus in more heavily on modifiers and how you can use them in a later video.
That's right. So now from there, we come over here to the Hierarchy panel. And on the Hierarchy panel, there's three main things that we're dealing with. Objects pivots, inverse kinematics, and link information.
Yep.
Okay. Inverse kinematics, this is something that we're not going to be talking about much in this course.
Right.
We'll slide a little bit of that out as we get a little bit later more involved with some character stuff.
Yeah, very cool.
I'm just trying to think how do I want to put that. Yeah, this is for a character class. That's the bottom line. You get into character rigging, advanced character rigging, and a lot of the stuff in here becomes very important. And then, of course, we have link information, which is something we will be talking about more as we progress into this class. But right now, the most important thing in the 3 categories provided in the hierarchy panel is the pivot. All of our objects have pivots.
Right.
How is a transform going to affect an object? Ooh, Buzz, man, that sounds all fancy and scary. What do you mean by that? Well, if I have an object, and Bill has already shown you guys that I can translate the object, right? And now I can rotate the object. But here's where it's really going to start becoming important. Where am I rotating this object from?
From the center.
From the center of that particular object. And when I was moving, you could technically say the same thing. Where was I moving the object from? From its center.
Right, it's kind of the point where 3ds Max is grabbing the object and transforming it.
It's where it's calculating those transforms. Now, in this particular case, where is our pivot point for the object?
Dead center.
Dead center. Bill, can we affect that pivot point location?
We sure can.
And we do it from this panel right here, right? Give us some examples.
Let's click Affect Pivot Only. Notice that our transformation gizmo has changed a little bit.
Yeah, it has
kind of like
fancier thing.
Yeah, these extra,
kind of
big,
blocky
thick arrows on here. I'll just unclick that. See how it's gone? Now it's back.
Very cool. What does that allow us to do?
Something. This allows us to move our pivot. Or we can,
relocate it.
Yes.
So now, with the same example I gave a second ago, so if you now turn that back off.
Sure, turn it off.
Now you'll notice our pivot is staying over there. Now if you grab that rotate tool again, look what happens when he goes to rotate it around Y. Now it's rotating around an entirely new point.
Yeah, especially check out the top view.
How cool is that?
So we've adjusted the pivot point of our object.
It's obviously very important if you create something like a door and you want it to actually pivot around its hinges, heavens forbid, you might consider moving the pivot point.
Yes.
So you can see where in animation this would become very important. But not only animation, things like scaling, because the scale transform is going to be calculated based off where the pivot is as well. So maybe you want a ball to squash and stretch from its base as opposed to from its center.
Sure.
It would look kind of odd if it was doing it from its center. Let's say we had a ball that was coming into contact with a floor and was doing a little squash and stretch. Just one of those rubbery type balls.
Yeah.
Well, if we leave our pivot point at the center, wouldn't it appear as though the ball was afraid of the floor? As it approached the floor, it began to squash without really touching the floor.
Sure.
So again, another example of where a pivot point would need to be adjusted. Now you'll notice you can go ahead and scale it. Scale that baby from over there. Okay, so again, now let's do a non-uniform or scale in a particular direction and watch what happens here. So now again, look at that, especially up in your front view and your top view, you can see how the scale is being based off of the location of the pivot point. That's the key thing here.
Right.
Now what's cool is they give us all sorts of features over here, if you will, in the hierarchy pivot panel section where we can affect pivot only, we can affect objects only, we can affect hierarchies only. I mean, the list goes on. And then we've got alignments where you see a big one, center to object.
Very important.
Go ahead and show them that one. Bink, back to the center.
Yep.
There you go. And then we've got other things, align to object, align to world, and then even the ability to reset our pivot. Again, not going into detail, just giving you guys a general understanding of what's going on here.
Right.
Okay? And then we've got adjust transform. So we have a few other things down here that are some bonus things, if you will, that we'll talk a little bit more about later. But the ability to adjust a transform where we're not going to affect children with hierarchical type situations if we want to reset a transform or a scale. And then some stuff dealing with skinning, which is something when we get into characters and skinning a character to bones, we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a quick overview of the pivot section. The main thing that you guys out there that are new to 3ds Max are going to be focusing on for the first few projects is going to be the pivot section here. And again, IK, we'll get into that a little bit in this course, but that's more so for a character rigging course. And link info, a little bit later in this course.
Sure.
Moving on from there, we come over here to the display, or excuse me, the motion.
Motion, yes.
Motion panel. I'm like staring at this one, staring at a laptop off in the corner right now, thinking, I wonder if, and then looking at this too, it's like all coming together at once. Motion. Well, This is where we're controlling motion.
Right.
Actually, it goes a little bit further. This is where we have the ability to start working with controllers.
Ooh.
So it's really the control of anything that can be manipulated over time. Because when you start getting into assigned controllers, we could get into some pretty fancy stuff in here.
Yeah, a whole new world opens up.
It really is. This is where we start throwing in controllers, and we're basically telling 3ds Max, okay, in regards to the motion, in regards to, I could use that twice in one sentence, to the translation of this sphere, we're going to control it with a noise controller, okay? Now, that's going to be some really fancy talk at the moment until we get into that a little bit later. But it is allowing us to assign special types of controllers to automate the control process of manipulating a position, manipulating a rotation, manipulating a sphere.
Kind of like plugging special little black boxes into our animation to handle things for us.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
Kind of like an animation assistant.
Exactly. We also have the ability over here to work with trajectories, too, which is really cool. And if I talk any more about this than what I already have, we'll end up spending this whole video doing this because it's too much fun.
Yeah.
A trajectory is nothing more than a path that you can see that an object is going to travel along. Yep. And there's all sorts of very neat things that we get with it.
Okay, move on before I get caught up.
Okay, I love the convergence. I love the spline convergence.
Just go.
We can make curves out of this. So moving right along.
No!
All right, so anyways, working with controllers, working with trajectories, we will deal with all of this in this course. Moving on from there, we will now come over here to our display panel. And from the display panel, we have the ability to do all sorts of stuff in regards to how things are displayed in our viewports.
Yep. How can you manage your scene?
Ooh, I like it. It is. Visually. How to manage it visually, if you will. Because, what we're going to see or not see,
Right. How you see it.
I want to hide all my geometry. Oh, heavens, what do you know? Everything disappeared except for my light.
Yeah.
There you go.
Maybe my scene is extremely dense with lights, and I don't want to see lights. There goes my light.
Yep.
It's just a very nice way to manage the way you're seeing things visually in our scene.
And just personally to me, what's even more important than hiding is the ability to freeze objects here inside of
So
display.
he wants to tick, 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 go down a little bit, and we'll open up or roll out the freeze rollout there.
Yep.
And so we've got just a few more things. All right, I've been talking forever now. All right, I'll talk just a second on hide. The ability to hide an object, unhide. If I want to take this guy right here and I want to hide this selected object, simple enough. If I want to go in there with a select by name, find that particular object, select it, and then say, hide unselected or unhide all or unhide by a name or, I have the ability to start coupling these things that you've seen together.
Yep.
I can also just come in here with an unhide by name, grab, unhide it like such. So this just deals with hiding and unhiding.
Right, which is going to be really important, based on things like, the speed of your video card. Maybe if you have like a really complex scene, you need to get things out of your way. Maybe you don't want to see things like joints if you're working on a character. The list goes on and on. Don't write this off.
No, there's a couple things here I really do like. Outside of just selecting something, what if you'd made a car engine and you'd modeled every little bolt that's in it, right?
Wow.
And they were all named bolts or whatever. You could say hide by name. Come up here and type BO for bolts, and you would have all bolts selected.
Or SP.
Or in this case, he's demonstrating it with sphere. And then we could say, okay, let's hide all those. Bink, they're gone. But we still have our plane here. We still have our light here.
Yep.
So
right, which in the case of such a highly detailed model might give you better feedback in your viewport, might keep from slowing down your render. There's a lot of reasons you can do this.
Absolutely. So again, this hide, this select by name dialog that you guys saw earlier, notice, keep this in mind, memorize the way it looks. You got it? You got it? So now if we say hide by name,
what's different?
I'll be darned, it's the same except for down here it says hide as opposed to select.
The title bar also changes. Where up here it said select objects at the top, it'll now say
I know, ladies and gentlemen, those two changes may be quite difficult to comprehend and grasp. You'll get used to it, I promise. Outside of that, everything else remains the same, okay? So let's go ahead and cancel out of that. And that even, the same for down here. Freeze by name. They changed the name, they changed the button. Everything else remains the same.
But let's talk about freeze. What does it mean to freeze an object exactly?
Well, let's talk about transforms again.
Unhide everything.
Let's talk about our stack. We have a sphere in there that has an interesting stack on it, if you will. Yeah, that guy.
Well, think about it. If somebody walks into a room with a pistol and says, freeze, what do you do?
Spoil my britches and I freeze.
Exactly. Getting away from all bodily functions, what do you do?
Okay, I don't move.
You stop moving,
yes.
and that's kind of the heart of the whole thing.
You kind of hold your position right there. Now, I did go ahead and I freeze this sphere that had been modified. Notice I can't select on it anymore.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's kind of like almost templated into your scene a little bit, if you will.
It's like I was saying a second ago. Let's get back to transforms. Now we're going to move that. No, you're not.
Nope. You can't even select it.
But you could still select everything else.
Yes, you can.
You could transform them.
So how handy is this? Well, what if you were working on a character and you started dealing with the creation of its control rig and you're putting in bones and IK
now
and
you're talking
helpers,
crazy.
but you don't want to accidentally select the character.
Right.
Freeze the character.
Yep.
It's that simple. Now you're done with the bones and you don't want to mess with those. Freeze the bones.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets even simpler. Let's say you're building a scene that's like a city street and you're trying to populate it with cars and like little fire hydrants and whatnot. You don't want to accidentally grab the buildings themselves and scoot them around.
Right. Sure.
You want to get those completely unselectable so they're no longer a factor. Same thing.
And of course, if you freeze something, you can unfreeze as well. So you go unfreeze by hit, and now you could actually select what you had frozen before, click on it, and now it is unfrozen. Right. Now you can move it around again.
Cool. Very cool. I like that sphere.
Yeah.
He's got a modifier stack and looks interesting.
Yep.
All right, so moving right along at the bottom, we just have display properties. And again, just a series of things that you can control display with.
Sure.
And then link display as well, the very bottom, display our links, and display replaces objects, or link replaces objects. So things that we'll slowly get into, most of these as we progress through our projects.
Right.
But again, everything that you've been looking at here deals with display.
Sure.
It's really that simple. Moving there over to the very last thing, we get into our utility panel, and this is where we have a series of utilities that were included with 3ds Max that did not really fit into any other place. So they stuck them over here.
Right, this is more or less a big toolbox. You can just kind of open up the drawers and see different cool things you can play with.
These are extra cool utilities that are not absolutely required for the creation of a 3D scene.
Sure.
Okay, and we'll keep it that simple for now. Okay.
Yep.
Outside of that,
there's one thing before we leave. I just want to show one thing. There is more than what you see here. If you click on the more thing,
absolutely,
there's a giant list of all these, and if you want, you can dig through and play with a few of them. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. The final thing I want to say about the command panel, talking about the whole thing in general, is as I have gone through these different panels, have we all noticed one thing that stays consistent?
Yes, did.
Zach. Yes, I see a hand. What do we have?
That would be the name and color swatch.
Absolutely. See, that's why I always tell students in my Max class there is no excuse at all for not properly naming an object after you have created one, because you always have the ability to name that object no matter what panel you are on. And if you want to go, you'll notice it's all there. And if you want to control its color, you can also control the color here as well. Ooh, that's nice.
And if you want, you can also go into that window and you can switch off that whole assign random colors thing if that drives you up the wall for some reason.
You got it. You sure can.
I kind of like it.
I do too, but some people don't.
It leaves for a fruity creation environment. So anyways, that gives you a general overview of the command panel, and we'll be playing with this a lot because this is really the heart of scene creation inside of 3ds Max. And that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks a lot, guys.